So I want to talk a little bit kind of further down this rabbit hole, right, of decentralization. I think people who are listening to the podcast know it's one of my main focuses moving forward. I just think that centralization is now a business risk, and decentralization will be the default, right? And so when we go down that path, that feels like there's not a lot of precedent when it comes to the legal system. Walk me through kind of what do we know and kind of what is precedent in the decentralized world, and how much of what we're seeing kind of play out right now will eventually end up having to be the case law. Like there's just uncharted territory. We haven't gone to court yet over some of this stuff. And so like there's going to be kind of those seminal cases that end up being the precedent. It's just that they haven't happened yet. Like, just how do you view the intersection of decentralized technologies and organizations with the law?
So specifically on decentralization, I think that one, we have not seen any cases brought yet. I think we will, and I think the way we will see it is this imputation of a general partnership and what that means, and to kind of and to explain why that's so important. If you and I started we started a new podcast company. It's you, David and Pomp. We're just doing stuff. We don't put any corporate form around it. It's not an LLC. It's not a C Corp. It's not a formalized partnership. The government imputes what's called a general partnership. And so you and I are 50-50, equally liable for all of the actions of our project, of our partnership. And that means all of our assets are completely at risk if someone sues us and they win. For whatever the suit, doesn't matter what the suit is about. If there's a damages claim, we have full liability. So over the years, over the course of from the East India Trading Company with the first actual corporations to the 1980s in Wyoming with the LLC creation, we as lawyers have figured out ways to limit our liability so that just the company houses the liability. And I think that the disregarding of these corporate forms by some of these decentralized organizations, when you then have a claim against them for whatever reason, a lawyer is going to look at this and they're going to say, okay, there's no corporate form. Who is participating? What's their percentages? Even if there's 100 of them and they all have 1%, that's who's going to get sued. That's who's going to be dragged into court. And I'm ignoring the whole aspect of like the anonymous component and multi-sig wallets. And, with enough resources, those things will come to light. You will find the humans, and those will be the people who are liable. So that is the case that we will see. We will see that will be the controlling case law, unless you can get a statutory entity created at the state level, any state, let's call it the United States right now, but like just the way you can form an LLC in Colorado, you can form a C Corp in Colorado. If we can create a state recognized entity as a DAO that then affords that entity the liability protections that a company would, that would mitigate that sort of precedent setting case. And would nip all this in the bud. I don't think that's going to happen. My firm's kicking around lobbying with the Colorado legislature to see if we could try to create something like that. But what I think will cause that is some big disaster will happen to some decentralized organization, and everybody else will go, oh shit, I need to talk to you. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on this. I apologize.
Fine.
I need to talk to a lawyer so that doesn't happen to me.
And so when you think through this is fascinating to most people because I think that they look at these DAOs and they say, oh, it's decentralized. One, sometimes they're actually not decentralized, but I think the hope is that you can actually build decentralized technology. And so how do you look at the balance between the promise of the decentralized kind of autonomous organization with then a legal structure? Does the legal structure kind of mitigate or almost like silence the decentralization because now there is a legal structure, there's lawyers involved, there's something to go after, or how does that kind of work if we fast forward and we say, okay, there's going to be legal challenges. Eventually, we're going to get to this like state recognized DAO entity. How do you think that kind of plays out, full well knowing that like this could change in the future?
So yes, on one hand, there is the sort of thought that you create the corporate wrapping and now there is, quote, something to go after. But I would argue that when that doesn't exist, we're going back to that GP kind of connotation, and the example where it was you and me 50-50, it's actually a little bit worse than that, in that we're jointly and severally liable. So if they can get a hold of both of us, then you and I are each, 50-50, whatever our quote unquote ownership is, responsible. But if they can only get a hold of me, then they can hold me 100% responsible for both of our actions. So while I can see on one hand, while someone working in the decentralized space might say, well, I don't want to wrap up my DAO in something that's targetable or that's located in Wyoming, or Colorado. But at the same time, if they're a citizen of the United States and they get that their company gets targeted, whether that's by the government or by a civil lawsuit, they themselves are already the target, and they are completely responsible if they're the only ones who can be found. So I think that is the sort of recognition that people don't quite have yet.